Astra Travelers, and welcome back to another episode of Tales of Teyvat, a Genshin Lore Podcast. Last week, we ventured into the history of Liyue, learning more about the Yakshas and their one surviving member, Xiao. I think we all have quite a better understanding now of Xiao and the trauma he's endured, and I'm super excited to see where his personal journey takes us in the game. This week, we're going to be discussing our new favorite Forest Ranger in training, who's come quite a ways from when we first met her, Collei. Additionally, I want to remind our travelers to visit talesofteyvat.com to see visual representations of the lore mentioned during today's podcast. Your guides have put them together for you to make things a little easier to understand. But before we start, I did just want to say I just got back from being at New York Comic Con for the last 4 days. And by just got back, I mean I got home an hour ago. And it was the first time I ever went to Comic Con. And I wanted to say that Hoyoverse did a beautiful job on the Genshin Impact booth. I know I sent everyone pictures. It was absolutely gorgeous. And I got to see Tif at Comic Con.
And it was really cool to see the Genshin booth, especially that I've been there years past. And last year, I saw one Paimon the entire time I was there. And granted, it was a limited capacity at the time because of the pandemic and everything. But to go from seeing one Paimon 1 year to the next year, actually seeing a full booth and just seeing so many. I'm sure, Amanda, you saw more than me, but I saw a lot of people in some really great Genshin cosplay.
Yeah, the most cosplayed character I saw was Venti, which was really surprising. And Al, I have some pictures of a beautiful manga version of Venti I have to show you.
Yes.
Oh, I saw
yes?
the picture of that. That was so cute.
And if we can I just give a little other Comic-Con side note too? Since there was a lot more presence, and that also included within Artist Alley, a lot of different drawings and postcards and little magnets and everything like that. And Amanda being so excited about all of the Genshin items, got a little too excited and accidentally took the sample off of an artist's booth.
I stole from an artist
accidentally because she didn't realize that they gave her a brand new one from behind into her bag.
Oh my goodness, you dirty little thief.
My God, Fee. What the fuck?
But then because Amanda is the purest of souls, the next day she walked back over and said, "Hi, I stole this from you."
Oh my God.
I didn't mean to, but I took it. The look on their face was fantastic. Because for one, they were kind of like, wait, we were missing that? And secondly, just the simple fact that she brought it back. So Amanda is the best.
Classy.
The true chaotic good. Like, didn't mean to do something bad. We'll come back and reprimand.
Yes.
And this booth just had like their own personalized acrylic stand where it was their art on the acrylic stands. And I bought like a little Luminan ether and it like holding hands or something. It was super cute. And they had the samples on it, but I also bought 2 prints from them. Actually, I bought 3 prints from them. I'm not going to talk about that. And so when they handed me the bag with everything in it, I just assumed the stand was mine. And I was like, bloop. And then I got home that night and I was actually in Discord with a few of our friends and Tiff was there and I literally took out the little acrylic stand and went, because I had 2 of them. Oh my God. But I just wanted to kind of echo what Tiff said. There were so many amazingly creative people there in the Genshin community, whether it was from the cosplays or down to the art that we saw in Artist Alley. I saw so many amazing things. And the community is so kind and so sweet. People wanted to stop for photos. People were recognizing me and I was like Disney bounding characters. You know how you can't wear costumes in the Disney. So they kind of wear half outfits that kind of match the character. That's like what I was doing. And people were recognizing who I was supposed to be. They were complimenting me on like my backpacks. And I got to meet Zach Aguilar and Max Middleman. They're the voices of Ether and Ito.
You did not tell me you met my husband. What the fuck?
Yes, I
cannot. What? I know I've been MIA, but holy shit.
I've been MIA too because of this. Both of them were just the nicest people. Zach was so humble and so bashful, and Max drew a tomato on the print I was having signed. He was like, I feel like you might like tomatoes. So this is a tomato. I was like, okay. I mean, yeah, that sounds great. And from the voice actors to the community, everyone was just so kind. And it was so nice because I think a lot of times we see the angry side of like the Twitter community for Genshin, especially looking into lore and leaks and stuff. And it was just so nice to be reminded that the community really is wholesome and wonderful and beautiful. And I will try to get together a list maybe of the shops I bought from for the website.
Oh, that'd be a great idea.
They all deserve so much love. So, you know, if that's not on the webpage for Collei, please, travelers, yell at me. Anyway, I could go on about Comic-Con for hours. Let's talk about Collei, who I happened to see at Comic-Con, just saying, but whatever. Collei is first introduced to us in the manga, but if you haven't read the manga, the first time you meet Collei is in Sumeru. Whose first time meeting Collei was the Sumeru quest line?
That was me. I have not read the manga, and which I know sounds very strange being on a podcast about Genshin that I haven't read. I haven't read the prequel, but I've actually at this point not done it on purpose, just so this way I can learn it from you guys and be able to ask questions and things like that. But anyway, yeah, Sumeru was the first time I met Collei, and I fell in love with her immediately. And not just because she was giving me a pita, because I mean, who doesn't love a pita?
I read the manga and met her there first. And I mean, just going from, last episode, we're just continuing that PTSD theme right on into this week. Because poor baby Collei has been through a lot.
Like, how do you spell Collei? Trauma.
Literally.
Yeah.
Trauma. I also met her in the manga. I can't remember when I stopped reading. I go back just to like brush up on stuff, but I remember all these little like memes of Collei in the manga in her amazing mummy getup. Obviously, she's in a particular outfit for reasons. And then like the drastic contrast of her actual in-game like aesthetic is a whole 180. What happened?
Yeah, for sure.
Biggest glow up of the whole game is Collei. I also met Collei in the manga, and it's so funny because I hear Al being like, I haven't finished it. Tiff's like, I haven't read it. I'm like, Brandon, how many times have you and I read it?
Enough for both me and Al not reading it.
Like 3 times.
I feel like I've read the manga like at least 15 times at this point. Just keep going back to it to learn more and get refreshed on things. But Collei in the manga was like, I hated her at first. I was like, oh my God, she's such like she was like a little brat almost, but it made sense.
Yeah.
She was sick, Amanda.
Yeah, but we didn't know that at first.
Right, at first
Just
she
like-
just seems like an angry tween, like emo,
Okay.
kind of bratty person. As you keep reading and then you start seeing flashback, you're like, oh wow, I was wrong.
Gets to be a brat sometimes. Trauma can allow that.
Yeah.
I do like, though, that we're talking about yet another emo character, because she kind of stays emo in the game now, because there's so many, like, even in her introduction, it's like, she's so kind and she's so nice to people, but she hides her, like, sadness beneath all of that. And it's like, total emo. It's like, we have a lot of emo characters, don't we?
Collei's one voice line about Cyno is something like, oh, can we not talk about him? It's not that I don't like him, but I'm getting a shiver again.
Jesus.
What a traumatized, like, little emo thing to say.
Yeah.
But we do meet Collei in the manga, and when we first meet her, she is approaching Mondstadt, and I think the guards try to turn her away. And they're like, nah, get out of here, kid. We don't want you here. You're sick.
I'm sorry. When did it become 1920?
What happened? Beanie the Paperboy. Read all about it.
And then Collei somehow does get into the city. I don't know if she goes in like one of the many back doors or if like the guards were drunk. Very possible in Mondstadt, as we know. And she releases her, what is it, the black flame power?
Yeah, the black fire. When she gets there and they turn her away, she sees this carriage pulling out, carrying two Fatui diplomats, and she uses this strange power that we know nothing about so far to send this black flame onto the carriage, which then turns into the shape of a giant snake.
Mm-hmm.
And it kills the two Fatui diplomats. And while this is happening, she takes the opportunity while everyone's distracted to sneak into the city.
Right. And I would like to say, and I could be wrong, that Collei doesn't purposely do this. This power that we don't know much about seems to be very based in her emotions. So I would assume being upset and angry that she was being turned away.
And then I imagine then the Fatui, knowing what we know now, could have just been a trauma then respond.
Well, she doesn't know that the Fatui are in that carriage.
Oh, okay.
Ironically enough, on the flip side, while Collei is being denied by the guard, Kaya and Jean are getting ready to take this carriage and escort them out of the city. At this time in Mondstadt, Varka has left. He is no longer in Mondstadt, and Diluc has returned. As some of our travelers may recall, after the events of Krapus Ravender's death, which is Diluc and Kaya's father, Diluc leaves Mondstadt for 2 to 3 years. We're not really sure how long, but he's returned, the events of the storyline in the manga, and Varka is gone. Jean is now the acting Grand Master. So they're getting ready to escort this carriage out. And one of my favorite parts of that scene is when this snake dragon flame like attacks the carriage. Kaya's like, what the fuck? Like, you just his face when he turns around, he's like, no, please. Why is this happening?
He is very dumbfounded, and Collei's just whizzing past him in the background.
So then Collei disappears. We don't really see her, and we find out that the two Fatui diplomats die. And the Fatui are not happy campers about this, and they want answers from the knights.
Look, they reap what they fucking sow. They created a monster. They're gonna have to deal with said monster.
And it's very much like a political response from Jean, where they're kind of like, well, we know that this is going to create a lot of trouble because the Fatui are going to demand answers of why their two diplomats were killed, especially when they were being escorted by, Mondstadt Knight. And they know it's very much implied that this is something that the Fatui does, is they take advantage of any kind of thing that they can in terms of using politics to exert power over Mondstadt. So they know that the Fatui is going to come back and be like, you let two of our diplomats die. How can we use this to take advantage of our standing within Mondstadt and get you to do things for us because of this?
And at this point in the manga, the Fatui are actually already trying to do that. The Fatui in the very beginning have come to Mondstadt asking the Knights of Favonius for help recruiting people to join the Fatui, specifically asking for kids to join the Fatui, which is something we'll jump into in more detail a little further down. It's Dodorei, ironically enough. We don't know which version of Dodorei, but a Dodorei is in the Dawn Winery asking for help, and Kaya, Diluc, and Seamus Pegg, he's the head of the church in Mondstadt, also Barbara and Jean's father. The four of them kind of huddle up in a corner like, nah, bro, we can't let this happen. And they tell them no. And the Fatui's response is, well, we got rid of Ursa the Drake, so don't you owe us? So the Fatui have already been egging them on in the manga at this point of, you owe us, you owe us, you owe us. So Jean knows, as Brandon said, this is not going to go well for them. And she takes her top man. I don't know how Kaya becomes her top man, but he does, and sends him on a mission to find out what the hell happened. In the meantime, Collei has found Amber, who has taken Collei completely under her wing and wants to help her. And at this point, Amber doesn't realize that Collei is the one who started this whole situation.
I almost feel like if Amber knew, she'd still help her. She just seems like that kind of character.
Oh. And she brings her to Jean and Lisa. Lisa agrees to help, but cannot properly understand something going on with Collei. And she writes back to Cyno, who is living in Sumeru, is someone that Lisa studied with at the Sumeru Academy, asking him for help. And from there, the Collei storyline, the manga, she kind of fights Kaya, and then Cyno seals the powers within her. Specifically in Cyno's voice line in the game, he says he once helped Collei seal away the the gods remains in her body. But the process was an unthinkably painful one. To many, enduring that kind of pain would be a prospect more terrifying than death. So it was very admirable that she was able to persevere through it all.
That's interesting, the way that he refers to that, because one of the things I read about, which maybe I guess we'll talk about a little bit more with the Fatui experiments, is that isn't it the Archon residue that they injected her with?
Yes, it is the Archon residue. And just to back up a little bit, we learned through flashbacks within the manga what really sort of happened to Collei to get her to turn out the way she has turned out at the beginning of the manga, which is that when she was a baby, her mother handed her over to someone working for the Fatui to try to cure her illness because she, I guess, was born with this sickness that we find out later is Elazar within the game, which we'll get into in a few minutes. But from, the time that she was basically a baby, throughout her childhood, she's experimented on and just traumatized over and over by the Fatui. And the Fatui even would block her mother from coming to see her to see how she was doing. So they basically also orphan her in a way and don't let her see her parents. And they did inject her with this reagent called Archon residue, which we find out from Cyno when he comes to visit in Mondstadt. That is what essentially infected her with this weird black fire power, which Cyno actually says is like a parasite, which I thought was strange. And that, that parasite, we also find out through the manga that it's not just something physical, that it's actually speaking to her in her mind. And it's very evil. It's very murderous. It wants her to kill people. And we're not sure what the deal is with it. We do know that it is the will of a god, but we don't know what god it is. And we also know through Cyno that it's more active at night for some reason. So she's able to fight it off better during the day, which is when they do the whatever ritual it is that Cyno does to seal the power within her so that it becomes dormant.
Right. And I think it's important to mention too that the Archon residue is made up of the remnants of dead gods, dead archons, and other mystical beasts. So basically the Fatui were like, ooh, bones and blood of gods, and they injected Collei with that.
They're such great guys.
I know. I love
And we also
them.
know that they use it within delusions because the black fire is also what comes out of Diluc's father's delusion, the one that he used when he was killed by Ursa the Drake. And Diluc uses that same delusion in the manga to throw the authorities off of Collei's trail by pretending to be the culprit who was responsible for the black fire incident that killed the Fatui diplomats. So I thought that was really telling that whatever this Archon residue is, it's something that the Fatui is using in multiple ways. And apparently one of the things that it does is also it holds off, it keeps Elazar at bay and protects Collei from Elazar, even though she's being sort of tortured by this black fire power within her. It is actually holding off Elazar. And so I think when Cyno seals that black fire power within her body so that it becomes dormant, I think that's when the Elazar resurfaces and starts infecting her again. And that's, I think, where we kind of pick up in the game, is after Cyno takes her back to Sumeru with him when they leave Mondstadt, and her Elazar has returned.
And just a little tidbit of information too, the Elazar causes a scaly kind of skin, almost like stone-esque, and is very painful. That's why she was wearing the kind of mummy-ish getup than in the manga, just for our less traveled travelers like me.
I was very confused by that because it looked like she first puts the wraps on in the manga after she's injected by the Archon residue. So I almost took the mummy wraps as more of a reaction to what was happening to her body because of the injections of the Archon residue. I could be wrong. They don't make it super clear.
Right.
But that's what it looked like to me, because you can kind of see the dark, purple, black fire looking stuff on her skin underneath her bandages.
Maybe I had a reaction actually even between the two things, because if it was stopping the Elazar from spreading, maybe that kind of even became almost like it took over for those same spots that she was having.
And also when Cyno seals the power in her body, her wraps come off at that point.
I think it's important to, Brandon mentioned that the Fatui experimentation, the black flame, acts up more with Collei at night. And I think we see that when we have the initial introduction to her. where she's dreaming. I forget what trailer it was for Sumeru that they released, but they're showing like all these crazy flames and the tree and the Irminsul tree, and Collei wakes up because Tighnari is calling for her to go do whatever they're gonna do as forest rangers. And she wakes up from a dream, and it almost seems like everything we saw in that trailer was in Collei's head. And I wonder if that's the black flame power within her, showing her these nightmares as well, even though it is being withheld inside of her.
Can I throw a crackpot theory out there?
Yeah.
What if the Archon residue that they were using to inject Collei in all the other people that were part of the experiments was actually, bits and pieces of the Scarlet King?
Definitely possible.
That's a really interesting theory.
Disclaimer, I've not finished the full Sumeru storyline, so there's probably like things I am not seeing, even though I was researching a lot. But there just seems like there's this big conflict between what the Scarlet King wanted for his part of Sumeru versus the actual forests. I'm like, what's the biggest way of fuck you we could have ever? Burn the tree. Burn the tree of knowledge,
I'm
get
fully
fucked.
caught up on everything in Sumeru that's been released so far. And I don't know how much you all want me to spoil you, but I would say that your theory is possible, but the Scarlet King, he isn't like a malevolent presence, ultimately.
Damn. Okay. Well, never mind. Get that theory out of there.
But he is, in a way, responsible for Elazar happening.
Ooh.
So it could be tied to him somehow.
And he's in the upside down pyramid, that part, like over there.
He's involved in like all of the desert ruins and temples and stuff. Yeah.
I actually haven't started that. I haven't finished the first part of the Sumeru Archon, so I haven't gotten that far yet.
Before we continue, can we talk a bit more about Elazar? Because I think we found a lot of cool stuff when we were doing our research of like what Elazar as a disease specifically is. Tif talked about how like it makes like those dark patchy scales or like kind of like stone skin.
Wait. I'm so sorry, Al. Because I have a lot on Elazar too, but before we get there, I just wanted to button up the Black Fire because I had just a couple of other things on it.
Yeah.
So when Collei gets her powers sealed within her body by Cyno, sort of like the big bad of the manga is this character named Barnabas, who works for the Fatui, but comes from Sumeru, or at least it's implied that he comes from Sumeru. And I believe may have been the one that sort of kidnapped Collei, essentially, and was responsible for all these things happening to her. And when he finds out what's happened, he's trying to convince Collei to unleash the power within her while they're fighting. And he actually says to Collei that, because she was experimented on and she was able to survive it, that she has been favored by our god. And he says, you have been favored by our god. And I thought that was weird because we know he works for the Fatui. I don't know what that means. I don't know if he's implying that she's been favored by the Dendro Archon, if he's talking about the Tsaritsa and she's been favored by the Cryo Archon, or if whatever god is speaking to Collei through this black fire, is that some other god that he's talking about that, I don't know, that he worships or that is somehow involved with the Fatui? Is there some other god that behind the scenes that we don't know about that they're sort of in cahoots with?
It could be that. So I'm jumping off of that for my one thing I'm really obsessed with about this, and that is the actual term Elazar and where it originates from. It is Hebrew and means high priest, but when you directly translate it, it means God has helped.
But so do you think that we know that the black fire, it counteracts Elazar, or at least holds it off.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely something to that. It seems like they're connected in some way. What I want to know is, what is the black fire? Because they talk about it having a particular smell, that it's not neutral like regular elements. It's almost like it's its own element that we haven't seen yet.
Right.
And I'm wondering if it's somehow maybe made of like abyssal, like void energy, because they talk about how when it attacks the Fatui diplomats, that it seems to hunger for life and that it devours anything living that it touches. Like it actually burns the people that it gets a hold of into cinders and ash in like seconds, whereas all of the material things around them, like the actual cart and like the books and the paper, were just a little bit burnt compared to them. So it's actually hungers life and devours life, which makes me think it's the abyss or the void.
Yeah.
So is there like a god, an abyssal god that's tied to this power?
Skur.
Well, maybe.
Maybe it's Paimon.
No. No.
No,
It's not Paimon. It's not Paimon.
You know,
I mean,
I just like to fuel that fire.
But if it's Archon residue, like, is there an Abyss Archon that we don't know about?
I mean, it would make sense.
or are they using the remnants of the dead Pyro god, the dead Pyro Archon? For some reason, the OG had died. Maybe they found that and somehow abyssal corruption corrupted said remnants of that Archon and that god. And they're kind of just going through in a very demonic way, consuming flesh. Because you're right. It seems as if it's only consuming life/flesh.
And we know that the Pyro Archon, the original that Venti said, they were sort of like a warmongering, angry type of Archon, right? So maybe it is the dead Pyro Archon, and they've become, miasmic, sort of like what you learned in the Xiao episode, and it's sort of just tainted energy from a dead Archon that's turned demonic.
Well, what about this? If you guys remember, we've been told that only 2 of the original Archons have survived. Now, I know that might not seem as true right now in the game, but we are originally told that only 2 of the original Archons are around. So, I'm sorry, Brian, what was his name? Belzebar?
Barnabas?
Oh, Jesus Christ, Barnabas. So you mentioned that Barnabas at first is talking about their god has taken a liking to her or whatever it was. Well, if the original Archon is dead, the Saritsa's not the original Shiznayan god, is she?
True.
I never thought of that until now, to be completely honest. So maybe it's the resonance of their original god.
But why would
it be connected to fire? Yeah, exactly. Why would it be connected to fire?
I don't think that the black flames have anything. I don't think it matters that it's fire. I don't think that's connected to any of this, to be honest. I think that's just how they're showing pure evil in the game, personally.
I see.
Because it is a dark flame, right? I mean, no pyro vision holders have dark flames. It's not like D-Luke's running around with like black fire around his claymore. Although that'd be badass, I'm not gonna lie. So it is curious. I mean, Collei is being experimented on by these with Archon residue, but that doesn't mean that it's one Archon's residue. It doesn't mean that it's one god. We also have to remember the difference again between the Archons and the gods, and the fact that they could be using Orobashi's remnants. They could be using an Archon's remnants. There's a lot that they could be using in this situation. And we also have to remember that the Fatui Harbingers a handful of them have been around since the Cataclysm. And we know at the Cataclysm that Makoto died. Don't know what happened to the other Archons, so far, and if they died at the Cataclysm. But if specifically Piero and Dodore and Signora were around during the Cataclysm, they could have gotten the remnants of God knows how many gods.
I definitely think that it's connected to the Abyss. And because also when they're fighting Barnabas, he uses the same kind of black fire power, and he transforms into this like giant horned lion beast thing while he's fighting them. And to me, it just looks like something that came out of the Abyss based on like the types of monsters we've heard about coming out of it. So that plus like the way that it tries to devour anything alive, to me really screams this is connected to the Abyss in some way.
And can we just look a little bit more at Barnabas, because you made me curious? He's actually the one who experimented on Collei, it looks like. And it says that he's actually a Fatui member from Sumeru.
Right.
A Fatui member from Sumeru?
Yeah, which makes sense because the Fatui often is found trying to steal children, which I guess is something we should take a quick dive into. In the manga, when we first meet Dodorei, he's basically asking the Knights of Favonius to let them recruit for the Fatui with like their orphans. Like Timmy's gonna be a Fatui member, right? Like, no. I know all of you think Timmy's like the main harbinger, not Piero.
Timmy is evil. He's evil. He's pure evil.
Timmy is the god in the black flame.
Why else would his imaginary fucking friend be a goddamn ruin guard?
Good point.
For those who haven't done the Venti storyline, we can go around seeing the imaginary friends of children using a fun tool that Lisa made, I believe. And when we go to Timmy, he has a ruin guard standing behind him. And so we just leave him alone in the story.
Because Timmy's evil.
No. Yeah, so Barnabas is actually the one that Collei's parents left her with. When she was like being experimented on by him, he specifically ordered his men to get rid of Collei's mother when she attempted to visit. And these are things that are very like embittering to Collei. She's very upset by it. I think that's where her emo angst comes in a lot.
Rightfully so.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But Barnabas is an interesting character. You know, he is from Sumeru. He looks Sumerian as well. He definitely has like the Sumerian garbs. But it's interesting that he has a power. And his power, like you said, is very remnant of the Black Flame. So maybe the Black Flame is something to do with Hanria as well. Maybe it has something to do with gold.
I found it really interesting that he was able to transform into this beast while they fight. And then when he's exhausted at the end of the fight, he transforms back into his normal form. So that's something we haven't really seen in the game yet.
Abyssal mutation?
Right.
Very possible.
Would that be similar to like Child's Val Legacy? What is it?
Oh, yes.
Oh shit, maybe.
Right. Yeah, and I wasn't clear on if he was using a delusion. I don't remember them showing like a specific device that he used to make that happen. So it could have been just a delusion and that was the power of that delusion. I'm not sure.
And I think it's important for us just to remember too, during the child fight, he has 3 phases. He's like a beautiful little Pokemon. We fight human child with an E. Then we fight delusion child. And then we fight foul legacy child. And for our travelers who may not have their heads wrapped around it, because believe me, it takes a while to understand it all. The foul legacy is something that he learned while in the abyss. And he does make note of that. And that is like the skill set he built out in the abyss. So it's really interesting that you make that connection because maybe this is something.
Oh, yeah, then maybe that could be something learned and not necessarily because so then his foul legacy is not part of his delusion. It's just a part of his skill set.
Right. And I'd like to say that his delusion probably gives it more power. It probably gives him more control over it. But it is noted that Skirk taught him the foul legacy and that's something he doesn't completely have a handle on. And in child story quests where we're traveling around with Tusser, at the very end, Child uses the foul legacy transformation to save Tusser, basically. And us. I don't know why he couldn't just let us handle it, but whatever. And when we eventually see Child again, he has like passed out in the corner. And it's understood that he also transformed because he was exhausted. So that's a really interesting connection.
Yeah. Side note too, just for anybody who's not familiar, who didn't go through that quest line, Tusser is actually Child's little brother.
One of many siblings that Child has.
One of many siblings. Just to put a little relation to who he is.
Right. That's really interesting. And we've really gone over a lot of Collei in the manga now. And I think it's a good segue into who Collei is now and who the girl is that we meet with Tighnari in the forest. So for, Tif or I know Al, you guys didn't read the manga in full. What were your first impressions of Collei in the game?
Green Amber. That was first thing. Because, again, stark contrast from what you see in the manga. It's, very joyous, very sweet. Oh, and you're a bow user. With something, with a little, not a teddy bear, but, basically kind of like a kitty cat that you throw out. Are you kidding me? Dendro Amber.
They actually have another connection, too, where it almost seems like Collei's trying to, be Amber. With the ribbons that Collei has on her with her vision, have the same design as the ribbon in Amber's hair, which I thought was neat. And it's almost like Collei looked at Amber and was just like, all right, I want to be her. And I think the same thing. Like Al said, she seemed very happy to help, very bubbly, a lot like the way that Amber was when we first met her. Not saying that she's not now, but when we first met her, she was just very like, I'm a net writer, I'm going to do this. And I feel like Collei had that same kind of energy until Paimon touched her and she went all crazy.
That's why, like, I always feel when Collei is super kind of mimicking Amber in a way, like as a survival technique, which is probably like, she saw Amber was this positive influence. She wanted to mimic that because possibly she saw that Amber's happy. I want to be happy. I don't want to be how I am. So it was mimicking. When that moment happened with Paimon, it felt like the mask shattered. Yeah. The reality of who Collei is so much more deep and so much more complex. Not saying that Amber isn't complex, but like there's a darkness to Collei that it seems, at least to me, seems a bit obvious that she's trying to cover that up, which is why I'm even more interested. What's that dark side? Show me.
In Collei's voice line about Kaya, she asks us how everyone's doing in Mondstadt. Are they good? And she says, I caused so much trouble back then. I sometimes wonder if I should make some time to go back there and apologize. In another one of her voice lines, she also mentions that she feels like she was rude to everyone when she was there and that she could have been nicer, but that she was going through a difficult time.
Yeah, when she shows up in Mondstadt in the manga, and first meets Amber, she's seething with bitter rage at the gods and at people with visions, because she and the other kids that were experimented on are exiled basically once they get away from Sumeru, and they're turned away from every city that they come to because they're sick. And in some places they were actually really cruel and like threw her on the ground and kicked her. And then she was, Jean and Lisa mentioned that she was probably wandering the barren wastes for years before she got to Mondstadt. So she really does have a whole lot of trauma. And when she meets Amber is so gung-ho about just helping her without even digging into her past. She doesn't really care what her past is. She just wants to help. And Amber actually takes her to the Lupi Harpastrum festival in Mondstadt and sort of like forces her to have fun for the first time in her life. We're sort of glossing over it, but it's actually like a really emotional part of the manga is her softening with Amber under her wing, and Amber really sort of soothes her rage and her anxiety and like shows her the beauty of Mondstadt, and she realizes what her life could have been if she was, if she grew up there instead of where she did.
Good thing the first person she ran into wasn't Diona, because she'd just be going around blowing up bars at this point.
It's like, oh, alcoholics beware. Collei is here.
I think Collei really sees Amber as a role model because of that. Amber was the first person to really be kind to Collei. She was the first person to show empathy toward Collei. And even in her voice line, she says, Amber is amazing. She's friendly and has tons of enthusiasm. Plus, she's really brave and always does the right thing. She's the person I admire most of all. She's like a cozy fire that makes everyone around her feel warm.
It's so sweet. I want them to meet in Sumeru so bad.
Right? She continues and says, there's no way I'd be where I am today without her. So much time has gone by. I bet she's even more cool and confident than ever these days. Who knows if I'll ever be able to match her? And that just really shows her enthusiasm, of course, for Amber. But I want to go back to what Brandon said about the fact that Collei was probably wandering alone for many years. So not only was she not shown any love, but she also lost a lot of herself. I mean, Tighnari notes that when Cyno brings her, let me backstep for our travelers here. After the manga ends, Collei goes back to Sumeru with Cyno. And Cyno basically goes to Tighnari, the head forest ranger, and is like, hey, boo, can you adopt this girl? Thanks. And like leaves her with Tighnari. He's like the only one that he trusts with Collei. He has a soft spot for Collei too. He's known to sneak around the village where she lives and like go and visit her and check in on her and check in with Tighnari on how she's doing. But Tighnari specifically notes that she doesn't know how to read or write. And he says, don't worry, we'll start with your name and we'll go from there. And in Sumeru, we actually have an entire quest line with the Aranara and Collei where she almost gets under hot water because her writing samples are found. And they think it's an and Aranara writing and not Collei because it's such childish handwriting. So Collei has not only lost her family and a bit of who she is, but she's also lost a lot of things that make the rest of the characters feel human.
And Lisa is actually the first person to ever teach her any writing, because Lisa helps her write a letter to Amber that she leaves for her when she leaves Mondstadt with Cyno. So I love that little touch, especially with Lisa being Cyno's student formerly.
Wait, Lisa was Cyno's student?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I didn't know that.
She asked Cyno to come to Mondstadt during the manga because there's some ancient writing in some of the papers that were a little bit burnt up in the Blackfriar incident, and she can't read the language that it's in, but she says, oh, I know someone in Sumeru who does, my teacher, so let me contact him and ask him to come over here.
It's very interesting. I don't want to talk too much about Cyno or Tighnari, but it's very interesting to see that Lisa, who is one of the best students at the Sumeru Academy in like 100 years or something like that, is going to Cyno. And it's like, whoa, what is Cyno then? If Lisa's one of the top students, and Cyno also goes to Tighnari, so then who is Tighnari? Who are all these geniuses?
The academia.
I also think it's a lot of fun that we get to see through the Collei experience, the intermingling of so many people from Mondstadt and Sumeru.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to see the world almost get a little smaller in that sense.
There's also the connection to like Snezhnaya through Collei because of the Fatui, and we don't really get a lot of that in the game so far. We get a little bit in the last Inazuma event we had, where Albedo and Xingqiu are found out to be, friendly with each other. Albedo does art for Xingqiu's books. They're both in Inazuma for this beautiful festival that happens, so we get to see some interactions with Kazuha and Venti as well. Venti's, came over asleep on a boat drunk as per usual. But that's really the only interactions we see are through these like very rare limited events. But Collei's interactions and connections are permanent. They're not going anywhere. So it should be very interesting to see where things go from here. Collei in the game so far doesn't have much of a storyline. We have the little quest line where we find out about her writing, and we also have a scene where she actually gets really sick and we can't see her. And that's the first time that we really are brought to light about the Elazar.
We can't see her, like she hides, or we...
No, she just sleeping. She rested.
Oh, I'm like, did she become invisible?
No, I wish.
Oh, the invisible woman.
Yeah, maybe that's why she was wearing the mummy wraps. That's what the Invisible Man did.
So after we do some sort of quest with Collei, we wake up the next day and she's gone. Also, I want to just note that in Sumeru, we sleep a lot. Like the traveler has never slept a moment in their life. And now they're in Sumeru and everyone's like, you should go to bed. We have a bed for you. You want to check into this room? And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, no one has offered us that until Sumeru.
We slept in the summer event.
Oh, yes, that's true.
On course sand.
We were in a tent. Paimon was like
course sand.
But we basically wake up the next morning and we run into Tighnari and we're like, oh, where's Collei? And he tells us that Collei's really sick. And we're like, what are you talking about? She didn't tell us that. And Tighnari expresses to us that Collei wanted to tell us herself, but didn't know how to, and asked him to inform us about Elazar. And that's really where non-manga readers are first introduced to Elazar as well. And he tells us that Elazar is this disease where people get like scales, almost stone-like, as everyone has mentioned already. And that Collei specifically are on her hands, and she has coverings on her hands, so we really can't see them. And that sometimes after a long day or an emotional day, she's exhausted and she just can't get out of bed the next day. And while Tighnari doesn't say it, I'd like to also believe that that's part of the black flame sealed inside of her.
That makes her tired.
At the end of the manga, Cyno mentions that the black flame is still in her and that she's got to be careful. So I can only imagine that between having the black flame talking to you in your sleep and having the Elazar scales growing on your body, life could be pretty exhausting.
I'm gonna respectfully disagree.
Okay.
Because Elazar, when you look at all the symptoms, it comes with paralysis, not just demon scales. So it's kind of like as you continue on, if things get harder and harder to do, maybe you'll start losing motion of your limbs, which probably comes with said limbs being encompassed of those demonic demonic or dark scales. I think that is the Elazar just progressing even more.
Okay.
Because the Black Flame is sealed and she has to be careful, but she hasn't been like exhausted when she uses her Black Flame when she was using that power.
Yeah, I took it as more just the Elazar progressing.
Okay.
Also, I don't know if you noticed this, Amanda, but near the end of the manga, when they're having the big fight with Barnabas, when Cyno first seals the Black Flame within her body, it's shown as like this circular mark on the back of her neck.
Yes.
And when Amber is protecting her with this flame shield that apparently Amber knows how to do, as create a flame shield. But when Collei sort of has her epiphany during that whole fight where she sort of realizes that she wants to live and she wants to be good and, wants to be like Amber essentially, but doesn't want to give into it. It almost looks like it's showing that circle on the back of her neck sort of burning away. And it made me wonder if we're supposed to take that as meaning that like the sealed power is gone for good and we don't ever have to worry about it again, or is it still there? Is it still sealed within her? I was a little unclear on that.
I think it's still sealed within her. I think that was their way of saying that it's no longer outwardly expressed.
Right. That she finished sealing it. She shut it way down inside her, maybe.
Right. And the only reason I say that is because Collei has a voice line. I know I keep going to her voice lines, but they're so intriguing because we have this character that's been in the manga that we've never seen before, and we're like, But Collei has a voice line, and it's about books in Inazuma specifically and how aggravating they are to her because they keep coming back to a power sealed within you genre. And she goes, ugh, here we go again. The power sealed within me grows restless, and you'd be wise to stay away from me. Why are people in Inazuma casually coming out with lines like these all the time? Doesn't it embarrass them when they think back on it later? Ugh, too cringy. I can't read any more of this. And I think that's not because she thinks their books are cringy, no offense, Yai Miko over there. But I think for Collei, that's more of a representation of the fact that she feels that way and she doesn't like being reminded of it. It's the same reason that she doesn't like when Cyno comes to visit. When she talks about Cyno, she specifically says she'd rather not talk about him if that's okay. She mentions that Cyno's a great guy and that she says, as a matter of fact, I have to thank him for bringing me back from Mondstadt to Sumeru and finding me a safe place to stay. It's just that whenever I'm reminded of the sealing process just before leaving Mondstadt, the back of my neck starts hurting again.
Yeah. It really is clear that she's just trying so hard to avoid triggers.
Yes.
Because even when you're playing as Collei, if you stop moving, her dialogue that she speaks in the game is basically saying, when I don't keep busy, the bad memories come back, and that's when the flashbacks start. So she's still very much in her trauma. And I think, like Al said, her coping mechanism is really just trying to be as much like Amber as possible.
Which I don't know if that's a good coping mechanism. Pretending to be that like happiest, cheerfulest person around when you're not, while also having a terrible, paralyzing illness, sounds horrible.
Yeah, and what's really scary about the Black Flame is that Cyno warned her when he sealed it that if it ever comes out again, that it will overtake her entire consciousness.
Right. Did he warn her too that it was going to bring back the Sanderson sisters? I can't.
Them back.
Every single time the Black Flame is mentioned, that's all I see in my head.
Yeah, I believe that's the hidden voice line.
Yeah. Unafraid.
So, that actually brings us to a really good point. Where does Collei's storyline go from here?
Oh, we're curing her. Oh, no doubt we're going to find why Elazar is happening. I have a theory that it specifically targets people who have maybe a predisposition to elemental power or a connection to the light realm a bit more than others. So like they're more than likely going to get a vision, something along those lines, because when I can't remember where you find the notes, but you find either it's one of the Fatui's notes talking about the experiments, and one of them it's Collei, and they talk about how something within them already is causing the Elazar. And I don't know if the Elazar, when we look at it, could it have originally been a gift with some really bad side effects? Because when, and going back to the translation here, Elazar Elazar being high priest in Hebrew, directly translating into God has helped. Is it a gift of an old god that has now become a disease because that god is dead? Like, I want to know. My mind is full of like, I want to know why. I want to know what this disease is. I want to know why it paralyzes. I want to know why it has the scales that it does, or why, or, the possibility of it being connected to a curse of Conria.
I was just gonna say that I've seen a lot of speculation floating around, and Brandon, it was so funny. Brandon messaged us a few nights ago, and he goes, "Is Elazar the Conrian curse?" But when I read it, Brandon, and I don't know if I didn't answer you, I don't know if you noticed that, because I thought you meant Elzer from the Dawn Winery. And I was just so confused.
That drunk, he caused it all.
Elzer, the unknown god.
Oh yeah, like I was like, is Brandon drunk? Like, is he okay? Like, he's convinced that Elzer at the Dawn Winery. And for those of you who don't know, Elzer, if you enter the Dawn Winery and you turn left and you go past the vase, there's a guy standing at a desk. That's Elzer. He's also in the manga. They did him dirty. He was very cute in the manga. He's not nearly as cute in the game. I have a headcanon that him and Adeline are dating. Anyway, I really thought you meant this random dude was like the curse. And I was like,
he is a curse. The curse is the Mihoyo curse, which is they have a great and amazing character design in the manga, and they come in to the actual game and they are just blank weird dolls. I don't like it.
There's definitely something going on with Elazar and the cataclysm, I would say. So there are these sealed orders that you find in Sumeru during one of your quests, and it's an account of someone that has contracted Elazar, and they say that this strange illness has plagued me ever since I entered the desert. And they talk about, what it's doing to their skin, that they're developing necrosis on all 4 limbs, that it's marred their appearance to the point where even their colleagues are looking at them with terrified eyes. And then at the end of this note, it says, I had the most terrifying dream. There I entered an underground city far beneath even the land from which I came. There I saw my deceased parents and all my friends whom I lost in that cataclysm. Their faces, too, had been melted to the point where no humanity might be glimpsed in them, but I knew for sure that it was them I saw. The curse, inescapable, but we will be reunited. So this person that's suffering from Elazar is having these weird dreams about their loved ones who they lost in the cataclysm, and their loved ones are looking in the dream like that person who is being transformed by the Elazar. So I thought that was weird. Now, we know that obviously Hilichurls, Abyss Mages, like the actual Conrian curse, it didn't actually develop necrosis of the limbs for the Conrians. So we know that Elazar can't be exactly the same thing,
right.
But are they connected? To me, it seems like they could be. Also, I'm going to try to talk around this so I'm not giving too hardcore of spoilers, but we also know that Elazar, it came along with the Withering, which is this sort of blight upon the land in Sumeru, and that the Withering and Elazar originated due to forbidden knowledge, which was obtained and brought into the world by the Scarlet King, King Deshret. So there's some kind of forbidden knowledge that is what originated this disease across the land of Sumeru. And it spreads like a plague. It causes people to go mad. And it also causes the scales, aka Elazar, to happen. It also caused the Withering. And you find out as you're adventuring through Sumeru and doing the Archon quest, you find out that, it was Greater Lord Rukkhadevata that really, she and King Deshret were sort of put to task to stop this disease from spreading through Sumeru. Right. But I find that really curious that, this idea of forbidden knowledge is what caused it, because to me, it almost seems like a divine curse or something. And it sort of ties into some of our theories and speculation of of what originally caused the curse of Conria, with, maybe gold being, the great sinner. Is the forbidden knowledge tied to sort of what we went through in Economia, where we know that Celestia is trying to keep the people of Teyvat from knowing that they were not originally from Teyvat, that they were not always there, that, the gods came from outside of their world? Is that the forbidden knowledge? Also, why is it making everyone go crazy?
Yeah, I got a lot of questions, but I haven't gotten as far in the Archon quest, so I'm hoping that I will have answers this week. Possibly.
The forbidden knowledge is that Timmy's evil.
No!
Just bring that back.
Agreed.
No.
Can I ask something? And
Yeah.
it's something that actually just popped into my mind. So I've done no looking up of any of this. But it seemed like from everything that you guys are talking about from the manga with Collei, it reminded me so much of Shenhe, with the fact that she's wrapped in those ropes as a way to hold back her power.
Yo, yeah, holy shit.
And like I don't remember. I know that the parents thought she was evil, then she got left behind and the Adeptus took over with her. But what is her, like, did it end up in the end that she actually has some kind of power that those ropes are doing their job with, or what, were they just fake?
So Shenhe was born with their most likely cousin, although Xiao calls her auntie, but we think that's more of like a respect thing based on how their family structures are set up and their culture. Xiao has too much yang energy. It makes him very hot. It makes him very easily flustered. He has like these like crazy moments where like he loses control of himself and he doesn't remember what happens the next day if he eats like hot food. Very wacky. But I feel like Shenhe's issue is similar to his. So she was born with a power inside of her. I don't remember exactly what it's called, if anyone else can name it, but her mother is very ill. When she's a child, her mother becomes very ill, and her father offers Shenhe up as a sacrifice because she has like almost these like murderous intent powers within her. He's like, well, I'd rather have my wife alive and well than have a murderous daughter. And he offers her up to this god, hoping that this like god or monster, hoping that he'll get his wife back, and he doesn't. And Shenhe actually slays the monster as a child. And then the Adepti take her in. And so her ropes are holding back this evil power within her. And she is told not to remove them. And, that's a really good comparison. The Collei, maybe those were on her not to conceal wounds, but to conceal her powers.
Oh, yeah, it could
That's
be.
a great point, Tiff.
Because they come off of her when the power gets sealed. So there's just one other thing that I wanted to bring up in terms of this whole storyline in Sumeru with Elazar, and, we have the Black Flame involved. There's definitely something else going on with dreams. And we know a little bit about this through the Aranara quests, where they basically live in Dreamland. And honestly, I don't remember the Aranara Odyssey well enough to like remember the specifics of like how the dreams come into play exactly. I almost took it as like a parallel reality or something that they can exist in and sort of get around things in. But I think that definitely has some kind of bigger role to play in the story, because if you think back to the Fatui Harbinger trailer, at the end of that is when Collei has the dream of the Irminsul tree burning by the hands of Dottore, it looked like, and she wakes up. So there's dreams involved in that regard. I believe that the Irminsul tree is tied into that, where it holds everyone's dreams. It seems like when you're doing the first Archon quest where you're in the Samsara in Sumeru City with Dunyarzad, and you meet Nahida, and you're actually like basically going through this whole storyline and around dreams, where they're actually using dreams with Irminsul to that's version of Alexa, essentially. And it's all tied in somehow, and I don't know how, but we do know that the Fatui are researching it, because they're still kidnapping children to the point of the story that we're in today. There is actually someone in Sumeru who's kidnapping children to try to lure out the Aranara so that they can take the Aranara and study them. And the person that's doing it, when you confront them, they do say that Dottore is studying the links between the Aranara, dreams, and the Withering. So there's some kind of bigger story going on with dreams. And there's also this book series in Sumeru called The Folio of Foliage. And within that, it's telling the story of the Dendro Archon during the Cataclysm. It's actually a really interesting read. I highly recommend that everyone reads it. Part of that, there's a quote that says, following her guidance, the princess of the kingdom of dreams gently snapped off the white branches and rebuilt the verdant hunting grounds from the withered fallen leaves, while the children of the forest, having set forth their ambition, were able to sleep peacefully in the end once more. So my first question is, who the hell is the princess of the kingdom of dreams? Could that be Lumine? Is that just some Aranara? What does it mean? There's something going on with dreams.
And could that be why Lumine or the traveler, when they first get to Sumeru, we have that little dream that brings up the tree and things go crazy?
Yeah, you're right. From the first moment we get there, dreams are involved.
Yeah.
Why does this bring me back to Xiao and the possibility that the old god, because wasn't he stealing dreams when we talked about last week and doing horrible things dream related?
He ate dreams.
Exactly. But it was because of the god. He was, kind of not stolen, enslaved to, I guess would be the proper term, but he was enslaved to that god, and so he ate dreams. Could this be that particular god come back, reforged, and is like, you know what, dreams? Ahungi.
Do you think dreams have a lot of calories?
I think it depends on the dream. If it's a nightmare, it's a nightmare, probably a lot, because they're not good for you. Are they?
Is this keto friendly?
I think they're low calorie, high fat.
On the note of dreams, we're told that the people of Sumeru don't dream as well, and that it's good that they don't dream. The academia has told them that dreaming is bad and that it's for empty-minded people, and the fact that Collei is having dreams, I mean, it seems like she's having dreams minimally, is almost scary, because why is she the only one in Sumeru having dreams? And is it possible that people being experimented on are the only ones having dreams? And I think, Al, you make a great point with Xiao, that there's a huge possibility that Xiao could have killed a god and ate his dreams, and now that's the same god that they're experimenting on these kids with the residue. Ooh, it's horrifying. And it's really upsetting that there's basically a serial kidnapper going around all of Sumeru, and it's not making headlines like the two why aren't those two Fatui people in Mondstadt talking about it? They're still talking about the chasm, for God's sake.
Yeah, they need to get with it.
I really think it's more of a control thing. I can't remember if Collei has that weird earpiece from the academia, and I think the whole idea that dreams are stupid, dreams aren't fundamental, and they're just distractions the academia is trying to put forth, is just their own propaganda of being the only thing you should be doing is furthering our goals and not doing what you want to do, our little Nailu, who's dancing and performing, doing her dream in a way. To me, it seems more of a control tactic. If you can convince a population that certain dreams are stupid, or a particular unconscious action is not good for you or just not worth it, I think people would just pretend that they don't have dreams. Or maybe the device in their fucking head is preventing said dreams so that they don't have ideas to go against the academia. But then again, I've read too much of 1984 and many dystopians, and this kind of gives me Big Brother vibes.
Just to clarify, though, what kind of dreams are we talking about? Are we talking about the nighttime dreams, or are we talking about ambition dreams?
For Kinalos Dos. Because Nailu, obviously, she has her passion of dance, but she still doesn't physically dream. At least she doesn't say so. But Collei says that she physically dreams, or she can remember that she physically dreams. And that could be kind of a mixture of both. I think it could depend. I'm not sure. This is a crackpot theory with lots of holes.
So I don't think Collei wears the Akasha terminal.
Right. I was just going to say, neither Collei nor Tighnari wear it, because it does not work very far outside of the city.
Yo, okay. Theory elevated.
So that might be why.
So they both most likely have them, but they don't live in Sumeru City. And also, Tighnari hates the city. He says it hurts his little baby ears.
Little baby ears?
His big baby ears.
It helps him cool down and also hear things good.
I do think Unfortunately, though, that is all the time we have today to talk about Collei and dreams and the Fatui and kidnapping. We would love to know what everyone thought about today's episode and thinks about Collei and some of the theories we've been throwing around today. So please make sure to give us a follow on Instagram, Tales of Teyvat, or on Twitter, Tales of Teyvat Pod, to let us know what you thought about today's episode or any of our episodes. Next week, we are going to take a tremendous leap from Collei into the unknown god.
Ooh, baby.
Paimon.
Oh god, oh god.
Oh,
You're
no.
not gonna want to miss next week's episode, that's for sure.
It's Timmy.
No. God damn with the Timmy.
Fuck that kid, man. No, I'm kidding. Don't. Just kill his birds. It's fine.
Well, travelers, I gotta say, safe journeys. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye, nerds.